again, back then, the internet wasn't out. You didn't have Google, you didn't have ChatGPT, so this information that you were able to compile, the salespeople shared it with customers, sitting across the desk from them, and they built the value in enough of these where you sold them to the point where you didn't lose money on any of them. So that 3 year supply dwindled and was sold out in less than a year, correct?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we used them as value leaders and placed ads and featured them and everything, but still, until I did that, they just sat.
Yeah.
We were considering just pulling the window wipers off and selling them in the parts department.
And
So,
now,
but
Mike,
go ahead. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
how did you first run into Advanta-STAR? Because you were in sales at the time, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I met your dad about a year into Advanta-STAR. Uh, in 1992, I was working for a Dodge retailer, and he came in with one of the binders under his arm, and said, "Here, this is I think you've got one of them, yeah." And I said, "Gosh, that this is just takes all the work away that I needed to do research." And when my manager the year before had approached me, he said, "Mike, you're a car guy. You subscribe to all these magazines. You can compile this on your own." Whereas when Within walked in, he had already done all the legwork for us, and to the nth degree. And so, it was very easy for me to take, one of these. Competitive comparison binders, lay it out on the desk, and pull up the competitor that I was showing against with my customer, and we were able to build a value in the product line and sell vehicles where probably we wouldn't have otherwise. Again, the Dodge retailers in the early 90s, we didn't have a lot of great product. I mean, we had good product, but you still had to make the case against very competitive marketplace. But, we sold Dodge Dynasties against Chevy Luminas, Toyota Camrys, Ford Taurus, Honda Accords. And we were able to build value in the product at the time. And, where a lot of people were struggling to sell the product, we had really very little difficulty. Now did it work every time? No, of course not. But the more we used it, the more product knowledge we gained.
Mhm.
And, with that redundancy and reinforcement, we became product specialists. And, really in the early 90s, the only real value that Dodge had back then was a Caravan. And they had just introduced the Grand Caravan, so that was pretty much the volume leaders. But we still had other products. You had Spirits, Shadows, Dynasties. The Dodge truck, that it wasn't reimagined until a couple of years later. And the beauty of Advanta-STAR, even then, when Dodge launched the new generation Ram pickup truck in '94, we already had a lot of extensive training from the manufacturer, but the competitive advantages that we had that Advanta-STAR brought to the table for all of us to use, we were able to compete, back then against Ford and Chevrolet. Uh, and the way we looked at it was every Ram pickup that got sold was a Chevy or a Ford that didn't get sold.
Hmm.
And, I can remember when the zone people came in and they said, you're going to sell 250,000 Ram trucks this year. Whereas in '93, they sold less than 85,000. And back then, you got to remember, they only had a regular cab pickup truck, not
first
extended
year came
cabs or
out, yeah.
quad cabs. Those came later. So they went from um,
Fifth
4%
place.
market share in '93 in pickup sales to over 21% market share in a year. So in an industry, when you're looking at fractions of a percentage growth as being a success, you know, the product, sold. But I can tell you locally in the market where what we worked in New Orleans and the general area that used the product, we sold a heck of a lot more and stole a lot more market share than many other areas of the country. And Advanta was a big part of that. Because while we had training on the product from the factory from Dodge, we didn't have the competitive information until Advanta presented it to us. and it made my
Definitely not the
job.
third party information.
That's correct. It's like, oh, you're just saying this because you sell Dodge. No, this is what Motor Trend's saying about our truck. This is what Car and Driver's saying about our truck. This is what Consumer's Guide. This is what Trailer Life. Back then you had a V10 offered in the 3/4 ton, and that was something that was unheard of back in the day. And this thing literally could pull a foundation, building off a foundation. I mean,
Yeah,
it has some serious
Ford
torque.
took, what was it, an extra 8 years to get a V10?
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy, the advantages we had. And, and over time, but I mean, you look where the Ram brand is today, 30 years later. But back then, it was tough, convincing a Ford loyalist to buy Dodge, but we did the job. We proved them there was a better product at the time. And same thing with the Chevrolet buyers.
Yeah,
So,
only with a regular cab. And they didn't even have a 3/4 and 1 ton until the next year either.
well, the 3/4 ton came out the first year. It was a late intro.
Yeah,
And
later.
that's the only way you could get the V10. Because I know
Right.
I would have been ordering them in a half ton, especially if I could get thick. That would have been great. But let me tell you, it
Yeah.
could still smoke the tires, even with a big, with
Well, we
constant
had the
traction.
Magnum V8s by then.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
the
But
318 and the 360 had picked up like
yeah,
45 horsepower overnight when they
right,
redesigned the heads and the multi-point
right.
tuning
From
kits.
92 to 93, they changed that. You're absolutely right. They went from throttle body injection to the Magnum, intake system, and it changed the horsepower rating considerably on those V8s and the V6s that had it.
Yeah,
So
it had the variable intake manifold runner length, and
mhm.
the valves grew like this much, and
Yeah.
then they even changed the lifter rocker arms ratio so that the lift on the valves was much higher.
And we can remember a lot of these things because those were serious, impactful, changes in the industry back then, that we were a part of, on the sales floor dealing with. And Advanta-STAR was right there because as these changes and nuances evolved, Advanta-STAR not only had that in its updated versions that we received, it explained why it was important for these updates, what the impact of changing from a conventional throttle body single intake to a multi-valve fuel injection system could do.
Or even from a carburetor, we still had comparisons to some carburetors
Right.
for the first year or two of the company.
But it made our job a lot easier because the worst thing for a salesperson to do is make something up that they think the customer wants to hear. You know, I've already said that, if automobile salesperson, you can't make an honest mistake. It's that guy lied to me. And, when we go out and we do training with our clients, we make sure to tell them if you don't know, don't make something up. Just tell them,
Find
look, I
out.
don't know, but I'll find out for you. And Advanta-STAR is one of those resources that you can use to find out a lot of this information if you don't know it off the top of your head.
Yeah,
And
it's a lot more reliable than Google.
yeah. Well, the thing about Google is this, and just like ChatGPT models, they'll tell you the first thing, they can't guarantee you that it's 100% accurate. That's first
Right.
and foremost. We go to the nth degree to make sure our information is accurate.